Let's get started. Members, welcome. This is the Bills Committee meeting on the District Council Amendment Bill 2023. Let's invite the officials to join us first.
CMAB C2 Friday check
即生，
即
即生，
兩位
係佢開始排咗先，佢淨係由佢排。
好，首先歡
First, we welcome Secretary for Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, Mr. Eric Zhang, Secretary for Home and Youth Affairs, Ms. Alice Mack, and also from the Department of Justice, Mr. Llewellyn Wood, the Solicitor General, and their respective teams. First, a note to members according to the decision made on May 5th, the meeting of the House Committee on the proposal to improve district governance. We had a subcommittee. We now turn this subcommittee into a Bills Committee to scrutinize the bill. The composition of the committee stays the same to ensure continuity between the subcommittee and the Bills Committee. At the last meeting, that is, at the meeting of the subcommittee, we wrapped up the discussion of the policy matters of this bill. At that point, I indicated that after the subcommittee becomes a Bills Committee, which is what we have now, we will get right into the clause-by-clause scrutiny. Members, I believe you have a table setting out the amendments, and members, I believe you have the Chinese and English versions of the amendments. That's a bundle that you should have. And that's a key document. So we will go by the table in front of you. So we have this reference table. Now we have different categories. We have categories A all the way to J. Those are the heads, and then there are subheads under the head. So we will start with A, and then gradually, eventually to J. Once we are done with J, we will be done with the scrutiny of all the relevant amendments in this exercise. Let's first invite the government to walk us through the clauses one by one. In this process, members may raise questions. So the reference table has categorized the provisions under different policy areas. Our legal advisor can also let me know if they have questions or comments. A reminder to members, at this meeting, you have to press the button before you speak. Once you've picked a seat, please stick with that seat, because we will know it's you once you press the button. If needed, I will raise matters of follow-up with the government such as matters of concern, and then I will ask the government to provide a written reply. And then the government will be able to provide a detailed explanation through those written replies. For this meeting, as you will see, we are working against a tight schedule. We have an intensive series of meetings. Given this time crunch, we have this arrangement. So let's be accommodating and understanding and work on this amendment exercises scrutiny. Walking us through these amendments will be two officials. First, from the Constitutional and Mainland Affairs, that's Mr. Freddie Chick, the Principal Assistant Secretary from the CMAB. And then Ms. Maggie Kwong, Principal Assistant Secretary, also from the CMAB. Ms. Kwong and Mr. Chick, once you're ready, please start. Thank you, Chairman. Let's get started. First, the long title of the bill. I refer members to C1566 of the blue bill. You don't see that in the marked up copy. So I will now read out the long title. Mr. Chick, can you go by the reference table in front of members? That's C1566 in Chinese or C1567 in English. So there's no page number in the marked up copy because it's not part of the marked up copy. It's only in the blue bill. So the long title is a bill to amend the District Council's ordinance to revise the functions and composition of district councils, to establish the District Council as eligibility review committee, to provide for the mechanism for sanctioning misconduct of members of district councils, to provide for related matters, and to make minor technical amendments. Members, if you wish to speak, please press the button. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. For this long title, there are changes to the wording. In the past, we saw composition and functions. Now we will have functions and composition instead. My question is, you're switching the order of the words functions and composition. Is that because you want to follow Article 97 of the Basic Law, where the Basic Law, it's Article 98 of the Basic Law instead? Are you following the order of the wording under Article 98 of the Basic Law? Is that the case? Mr. Kwong, please. Mr. Chick. If needed, my colleague can supplement. Let me first explain this. Previously, there were members asking us to put the word function all the way from Section 61 to the long title of the District Council's ordinance. So now we put functions first, followed by composition. Chairman, a follow-up question. Let's go to Article 98 of the Basic Law. Functions and composition, while they have a different word for Article 98 of the Basic Law. So we use functions in the bill instead. Or is there a difference in meaning between the two words? If there's no difference in wording, will the government consider aligning the wording you have in the bill with what you have in the Basic Law? Mr. Chick, my colleague from the DOJ can explain this further. From the DOJ, under Cap 547 District Council's ordinance, they use the word functions. That's the existing wording. So now, this time, we follow the wording of the existing provision. Under the Basic Law, Article 98, the English version says powers and functions. The word functions in our local statutes covers powers and duties. So the word functions is broad enough to cover the meaning. So we stick to the existing wording functions. Thank you, Chairman. Chairman, if the two words are the same, then have we considered using the same word in the Basic Law so that we have consistency between the District Council's ordinance and the Basic Law? Otherwise, you end up giving people unnecessary room for speculation due to discrepancies in the wording. Cap 547, the existing provision. Can I refer members to page 3 of the marked up copy? Second last term in the Chinese version. Functions cover powers. So in law, function already covers a power and an authority. So the word function is broad enough to cover both powers and functions or authority. So you're saying function is the same as power. Is that the same? Is that what you're saying? In law, they're the same. Mr. Lai is wondering why not use the wording in the Basic Law. Is there a particular objection that you have to the wording in the Basic Law? Now, function covers power and authority. If in English that functions includes a power and an authority. If we break it down in the provisions, powers and functions, you end up repeating the phrasing. 5 minutes for each member, questions and answers. Sorry I didn't bring that up earlier. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok, if you have follow-up questions, please ask in the second round. Mr. Tommy Cheung, Chairman. I have two questions. The first one was asked by Mr. Lai Tong Kwok already. I did not refer to the English. I saw the word power and authority. The government has already explained this point. Well, I see this switching in the order of the wording, functions and composition. Can the government explain why swap the two words? Why swap the order of the two words? Why put functions before composition? What difference does it make? If there is no change in the meaning of the functions, why switch the order of the wording? On the same note, I have a question about the next part. In part 4 of Division 1, and that goes to part 2 for A. So is the government making changes to the other parts of this bill? Is there a shift in the emphasis of the bill? So functions taking precedence over composition, is that the case? And then in other parts of the bill, the functions as a part of the bill is brought forward. Can the government tell us the thought process they adopted in drafting? It's a drafting question, so Mr. Can you tell us more? Thank you, Chairman. The functions of district councils used to fall under Section 61. We now move it to Section 4A instead, and the composition will be under Section 5. So we will set out the functions before the composition. So in part 2, I refer members to part 4 of the marked up copy. In part 2, it says functions and composition, etc. It used to read composition and functions in the old ordinance. So to ensure consistency, we make this textual amendment. So we put functions before composition to align with the way the content shows up in the bill. Secretary, Mr. Zhang. At the subcommittee meeting, we had this discussion. Mr. Lai made a great point. He said that when we talked about functions of district councils, that part didn't come up until section 61 under the ordinance. He felt the functions of district councils are important, so we need to put that up front in the ordinance. We agreed, so we decided to bring forward the functions of DCs. So someone reading the ordinance will get to the functions of the DCs earlier on. That's why we are making this consequential change to the long title. So that's what we are doing here. This means no substantive changes to the ordinance. It's simply reordering the sections. Deputy Chairman, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Chairman, I have no objection to the swapping the order of the words composition and functions. Since the functions will show up in an earlier section, so it only makes sense to switch the words in the long title. Mr. Lai raised a question about powers, authority, etc. You see, the word functions in the English text, it covers powers. I'm no legal expert myself. I believe it's very likely that the word functions will have a restricted meaning in certain context. So why not add the word power to the long title? Now, of course, our legal experts may have their considerations, but for the average person, when someone has a function, they are supposed to have their powers. I think it's better to spell things out clearly, and that would make things more accessible to the reader. That's my view. Mr. Ron Shen. Thank you. I don't have any issue with the words functions or composition, but I'll have this point to make. Now, one major change in this exercise is who the district council's chairman will be. In part 6 of district council's ordinance, now it said that there's a part on the functions of district councils, and then there's a part on the chairman, deputy chairman, and the procedures. Now we will no longer have deputy chairman, and we will have a different way in which the chairman will be selected. Now the district councils can appoint their own committees. That power also goes to the district officer. Since we will have a different way of producing the chairman, can we also include that change in the long title? So we can have something along the lines of providing for this chairman and how the committees will be appointed and what will be due about the undesirable behaviors. And these are important changes, but they do not show up in the long title. I think we're missing something if we leave those out.
Let's see if the government has any response to the question in relation to vice chairman. Chair, if members are of the view that we should adopt the wording and the basic law that is using the word functions, well, when we form legislations, as long as the wording is not in contrast with the purpose set out in the basic law, that would be fine. If members in general are of the view that we should change the wording, we will look into it further. If the wording we use will not restrict our legislation, then we will look into it. Please look into it. It's up to you regarding the final decision. For the question asked by Mr. Ronick Chen, I will defer it to the Home and Affairs Department. Thank you, Chair. Well, there is the wording to provide for related matters in the long title. We think that this phrase can cover the matter in relation to procedural changes and how we're going to have the chairman appointed. Chair, I note that there is this phrase in the long title, but then this phrase seems not to be related to major changes. I feel that there may be a need that we should explicitly mention the procedural changes. I think we should express that in the long title to make it clearer. That's a comment from Mr. Chen. Any responses? We thank a member for the suggestion. We will consider it after the meeting. Mr. Chang Hak-kan. I want to respond to Mr. Ronick Chan's suggestion. If you look at the leaflets from the government or the LegCo brief for this meeting, it says that there are 4 parts to this amendment bill. That is the functions of the district councils and how the chairman will be appointed, and also thirdly, the composition and election method of district councils, and also the mechanisms that will be introduced, including the monitoring mechanism. There are 4 parts to the amendment bill. If we skip the part about the appointment of chairman in the long title, it seems that it's not clear enough. I hope that the government can think about it and see whether the appointment of the chairman should be included in the long title. You don't have to include it or mention it in detail, but maybe you should mention it somehow in the long title to make it clearer. Well, the comment made by the member is clear. Well, please consider the comments and suggestions made by Mr. Ronick Chen and Mr. Chan Hak-kan. Mr. Lai for the second round, 4 minutes, questions and answer included. I also share the same views with Mr. Chan Hak-kan and Mr. Ronick Chen. If you look at the long title, or if you look at the bill, there are 3 parts that includes the appointment and the registration of DC members. I feel that chairman is an important part of district councils, so you may want to mention it in the long title. It is a position with significant powers, but you omitted it or you missed it out in the long title. Well, from the perspective of formulating the long title, I feel that there should be a more elaborate explanation in the long title. Well, please consider members' comments. Mr. Tommy Chan for the second round. The Liberal Party supports the suggestions made by the member about the part of chairman and the wording functions and composition. Well, please consider all these comments in one go. Any other comments? If not, we'll continue with the clause-by-clause examination. Sorry, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chair. I agree with what the members have just said. That is, first, adding the destination of DC chairman into the long title. Well, I won't go into the details again. I have a question about the differences between the blue bill and the marked up copy. For LC paper number CB2513/2023, we see that the amendments include functions and composition as well as the appointment of DC members, etc. If you refer to the blue bill, it usually should be consistent with the marked up copy, but I see that on page C1566 of the blue bill, that is a Chinese version of the blue bill, there's no mentioning of it. That is, in the blue bill, it doesn't say the appointment of DC members specifically. There's some missing out on the wording. Is it a difference in terms of expression, Mr. Ng? Well, for the long title, it refers to the long title of the District Council's Amendment Bill 2023. As for the long title mentioned by Mr. Chen, it is the amendment of CAP 547. If you look at clause 3, that is C1570, you will see the long title of page 1 of the marked up copy, and that is inconsistent with the part I mentioned in the blue bill. Sorry, page 1570. Well, please repeat the page number again. C1570 of the blue bill. Clause 3. It is amendment to the long bill, to the long title. Any other questions? Thank you. Mr. Stanley Ng. Chair. We're all concerned about the areas covered in the long title. I noticed that in the long title, there is a mention of technical amendments. Well, should we describe it as minor technical amendments? If it is an amendment, it should be a significant amendment. There shouldn't be something called minor technical amendment. I think an amendment is significant regardless of the scope of the amendment. Should you change it to related or relevant amendments? Well, is there a specific reason why you put minor technical amendment there? Thank you, Mr. Ng, for the question. Well, on the wording technical or minor technical amendments, they include the provisions that are outdated. They are not related to the 4 major parts to the amendment bill. For related matters, they cover all the major amendments already. A long title of the bill should cover all the amended parts. For outdated provisions, if we take the opportunity to amend them, we include them as minor technical amendments. Any other questions? If not, government officials, please continue. Marked up copy. Or if you refer to the reference table, we now come to still page C1566. It covers the commencement of the bill as well as the date. We will continue with C1566. Short title and commencement. This ordinance may be cited as the District Council's Amendment Ordinance 2023. This ordinance, A, comes into operation on the day on which it is published in the Gazette for the purpose only of enabling arrangements to be made for the constitution of the 7th term of office of the District Councils, and B, insofar as it has not come into operation under paragraph A, comes into operation on the 1st of January 2024. Thank you, Chair. Any questions from members? Yes, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Thank you, Chair. Bracket 1, and bracket 2A, well, I have questions about them. Let's look at the Chinese version first. It says it is the arrangements are to be made for the constitution of the 7th term of office of the district councils. It looks like bracket 2A is only referring to the 7th term of the office of the district councils. But if you look at the English versions, it says it comes into operation on the day on which it is published in the Gazette for the purpose only of enabling arrangements to be made for the constitution of the 7th term of office of the district councils. In the English versions, it mentions the constitution of the 7th term. So my first question, there are discrepancies between the Chinese and English versions, and the main points to be expressed here seem to be different. I don't know if you rely mainly on the Chinese or English version, but I want to ask you about the discrepancies between the two versions first. Mr. Chek. On the drafting of the legislation, I'll defer it to my colleagues. I'll talk about the short title first. There are two parts to the ordinance. The first part is in relation to the constitution of the 7th term of DCs, and it will be gazetted right after the bill is passed, because we need to form the new term of DC before the 1st of January 2024. Secondly, apart from the Constitution, all the legislations or provisions in relation to the operation of the DCs, because the current term of DC will expire or will end on the 31st of December 2023, and the new term will come into operation on the 1st of January 2024. Well, my question is that there are inconsistencies between the Chinese and English versions here. In the Chinese version, you emphasizes the term. Sorry, please let the officials respond first. Thank you for the question. In English, the constitution of the 7th term of office of the district councils is mentioned. In general, we have to specify which term of DCs. We made reference to the Legislative Council Ordinance. In that ordinance, we also mentioned the term of office specifically. We think that the meaning of the Chinese and English versions are consistent. It's just that it looks like the points of emphasis may be different, but they both talk about when the ordinance will come into effect. I think I understand Mr. Lai's question. In English, you have the constitution of the 7th term of office of the district councils. So you're not talking about just the term of office, but you're talking about the constitution of the 7th term of office. But in Chinese, you only mention about the term of office. So are they consistent? I want to know the draftsman's views. Thank you, Chair. In Chinese, It also mentioned about the constitution of the seventh term of office, so we think that both the Chinese and English versions are consistent. But we understand the concern of Chair in relation to the wording of the Chinese version, so we will look into it further. Well, because in the English version, you mentioned specifically the constitution of the seventh term. If you say the Constitution and the seventh term of office, it may be better. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Well, I understand. It's just the order of wording in both the Chinese and English versions. In English, we have the Constitution of the seventh term of office. In Chinese, we also have an equivalent for Constitution, and we also have the equivalent of the seventh term, but the order of the words is a bit different. But, well, it's all right. Please look into it after the meeting. Deputy Chair, I think in Chinese, if you just say the arrangements are to be made for the seventh term of the district councils, that would be clear. Because it's about the arrangements for the seventh term. It's not about the seventh term of office of the district councils only. So I share the same views with Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. In Chinese, it sounds a bit clumsy now, because it seems that the emphasis falls on the term of office of the district councils. So my suggestion is to remove the word of office. That's a suggestion from the member. Please consider it in one go. Mr. Chen Xiuhong, I agree with the observation and comments made by Mr. Lai Tong Kwok. Deputy Chair also mentioned what I want to say. Term of office does not only include the term only, but everything that happened during a term. So I support the views made by Deputy Chair. If you remove the words of office, it may be clearer. Mr. Stanley I have a question. It says the purpose is only for the seventh term of office. Does that mean in future we need to go through a legislative amendment exercise when there is a new term of office of the district councils? Does that mean every year or every term of the district councils we have to go through these legislative amendments? Mr. Check. Bracket 2A refers to the constitution of the seventh term of the district councils, and after the bill is gazetted, it will come into operation. The seventh term of the DC will begin on the 1st of January 2024, or the relevant work will begin on the 1st of January next year. Well, you mentioned that the ordinance will come into effect during the 8th and 9th term of DCs. Well, unless there are further legislative amendments in the future, we will stick to the amended ordinance.
Mr. Xiu Kwa-fai, I agree with Dr. Lai Kwok on the point about 2A, and I think it's better if we can lose the three words, "dik yam ke" in Chinese. Dr. Lai Kwok, the Vice Chairman, suggests amendment to the Chinese version. And I suggest that we should also amend the English version. We should lose the words "the Constitution of." That is just to be made for the 7th term of office of the district councils, and that would be consistent with the Chinese version. This is just my proposal. Please consider it. I believe that several members have expressed their views. We have heard you, and we would consider your suggestions and make appropriate arrangements. Thank you. Mr. Lai Tong Kwok, second round, 4 minutes. Thank you, Chairman. On section 1, bracket 2. Now, you have A and B, and A says that for the constitution of the 7th term of office of the district councils, they will come into operation on the day on which it is published in the Gazette. For the remainder, it will come into operation on the 1st of January 2024. So which sections of the bill will take effect immediately? So we have to look at the different clauses individually. Then there will be disputes whether a legal provision comes under 2A or 2B, because you didn't specifically say that which part of the bill will come into effect on which day. There are so many provisions in the bill. Which provisions will come into effect immediately on the Gazetted day and which will not? So we have to look at them one by one. We'll look at whether the provision is related to the constitution of the 7th term of the DC. Will there be a lot of disputes as a result? Because you will have to look at the provisions one by one. And if people think that a certain provision is not fair to them, then they will say that this should not be brought into effect immediately. So, to my understanding, if you want to bring certain provisions into effect immediately, you name them and specify them. You lay out the principle here, but then you didn't specify which provisions will fall under which part. So I'm afraid that that might spark disputes, and as a result, in the formation or constitution of the 7th term of office, then you will bump into unforeseeable difficulties. Has the government considered that? Can I defer to the law draftsman? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lai, for your comment. For this commencement provisions, we have taken reference from other election ordinances, and these are consistent, including, say, the improving the electoral arrangement legislation. The same approach is adopted. So we would not be saying specifically which provisions fall into A or B. So the provisions relating to the constitution of the 7th term of office will come into operation on the Gazetted date. But then for the remaining parts, they will come into effect later. Because the 6th term of the district council is still working. Now for, say, the delineation of the boundaries, those provisions will take effect on the Gazetted date. But then the existing district councils are still working, so certain provisions have to remain in force. So these are the two objectives of the bill, and they will take effect on different days. So there is no need to specify which provisions will come into effect under A or B. Any supplement? Mr. Lai, I understand where you are coming from when you drafted the bill, but exactly which provisions will come into operation immediately on the Gazetted date and which will not? And that is, they will take effect on the 1st of January 2024. And that has everything to do with the operation of the future DCs. So that means that we will have to look at the provisions one by one to see whether they fall under A or B. But then you just lay out the broad principles here without specifying the exact number of the provisions. So is it possible in the future that there might be disputes? And if the provisions take effect earlier than they should, then there might be problems. I don't think the government has addressed my concerns. Mr. Chair, can you address? Can I defer to the Lord Draftsman to take that question? Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Lai, for your question. Let me supplement. Mr. Ng has already explained the overall objective of the bill. Well, let me cite an example. Say, for example, on the composition of the DC. So we specify the different types of members for the 7th term. And for the relevant provisions, they will take effect on the 1st of January 2024. But then for the same provision, it might carry different objectives. So these provisions may take effect on a different day. Now, to prepare for the operation of the 7th term on the 1st of January, we have to hold elections. There will be new composition method. So for the relevant provisions related to elections, they will take effect on the Gazetted day. But then the 7th term will only come into office on the 1st of January. So the provisions relating to that aspect will take effect on the 1st of January. So that's what Mr. said. So it's difficult for us to specify which provisions will fall under A or B categorically, because for the same provision, they may take effect on different dates. So if there is no further question, then we will move on. Now let's move on to the clause 2. And there isn't anything mentioned on the marked copy. Let's go to C1580. And that is the amendments specified in parts 2, 3, and 4 amended as set out in those parts. So these are the amendments amended here. Okay, Mr. Chick, no further question? So let's move on to clause 3. C1570. And that is the marked up copy, page 1. This is a long title here. In our previous discussion, members have touched on this. And if there is no further question, I will not go through it in detail here. Any further question here? Please move on. We are done with the preamble. Let's move on to A, functions of DCs and the relevant amendments. Can I defer to the HAD colleague to go through the provisions? Please turn to page C1580, and that is clause 5. And the marked up copy, page 4. Well, let's pinpoint the page number. That is page 4. And we have added in part 2 the heading here. The heading, as we explained, we would add in functions. And we used to have only directly elected members, but now we have other members. So hence the amendment here. What is the meaning? Is there any particular meaning to etc.? Declaration of districts, establishments of district councils, functions and composition of district councils, etc. It seems that the sentence is not a complete rendition. Can I defer to the law draftsman to take that question? Yes, thank you, Chairman. For part 2, the heading used to be very long, so we deleted the declaration number of elected members and declaration of constitutions, and that relates to clauses 6, 7, and 8. And normally, for the present date drafting style, we would not give all the details in the heading, because after all, the heading is just for identifying the gist of the relevant section. So that's why we added etc., and that includes the terms of office, declaration of constitutions, constituents, etc. Because after all, the heading of the law doesn't carry any legal effect, so we're just trying to simplify things. Because you said that declaration of districts, establishments of district councils, and then functions and composition of district councils, etc. Should you be adding words like declaration of these matters? Well, this is just a suggestion. I appreciate the chairman's views. Well, that covers functions and composition of district councils. We and also establish 3 things are included here. So we're talking about the functions and compositions of district councils, etc. So should we lose the word etc.? Because in the heading, we didn't say specifically declaration of constituencies. So we have the word etc. here to encompass that aspect as well. Thank you. Mr. Ronick Chan. Well, shall we add in 党 si yi after 党 in the Chinese rendition, because we use the word 党 to end a sentence in Chinese? That sounds very strange. Well, that's a suggestion. Please consider it. Yes, we will. Any other question on the heading of part 2? If not, let's move on. Let's move on to page 4 and 5 of the marked up copy. We would add in 2 sections, sections 4A and 4B, and that is 4A is functions of district councils, and 4B is the term of office of district councils. And functions of district councils, the functions listed here are the same as those in the document previously submitted to the electrical. And 4A, point A, Mr. Lai Tong Kwok earlier said that the drafting should align with the wordings in the basic law, so that should be in a passive voice. So to be consulted by the government is the wording adopted here. And then earlier, we have also heeded the views of members, and that is the people in the district is used to replace residents in the district. So that is to say that the people we serve include not only the residents but also people working in the district. So that's the difference between what we have submitted earlier. And then for 4B, we say that the terms of office of the district council is 4 years, and each term of office is to begin on the 1st of January next following an ordinary election. So that makes it clearer, well, as far as the term of office is concerned. Because, well, in the past we said that an election would be held once every 4 years without specifying the date of the beginning of the term of office. So that's the main gist of the amendment. Mr. Ronick Chan. Thank you, Chair. That is to 4A, district to be consulted on the district affairs affecting the livelihood and living environment in the district and well-being of the people in the district. I've checked into other laws in Hong Kong. The word livelihood is seldom used. Well, when we said 民生 in Chinese, it refers to a certain education institution. And the word livelihood is seldom used, and there is no general understanding of the term livelihood. So would you be considering other terms commonly used in other laws? Because livelihood covers everything, including the living environment and so on. And so why the need for living environment? And then for E, it says that to assist in the smooth delivery of services, and there is no objective standard of the smooth. I've checked into other laws. It usually says smooth and effective. So why do we need the word smooth here in this sub point E? Yes, Mr. Kong. On the first question, can I defer to the law draftsman to talk about the use of the word livelihood in other laws? Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, member, for your question. For the District Council, it will work on improving the livelihood and so on. And maybe that's not a function undertaken by other organizations, hence the seldom mention of the word in other laws. So we would like to highlight the functions of the district councils in the future, and that is they would try to work on improving the livelihood of people in the district. So that word might not be frequently used in other laws, but I think the meaning of the term is very clear. Chair, well, they have not addressed my question. If you use the word livelihood, which is rarely used in other laws, and then why the need to use the word living environment be in the existing DC ordinance, the word well-being of the people in the district and also public facilities and services are used. But then if livelihood covers everything, so why is the need for the term living environment here? That seems superfluous. And then they have not answered my question about the use of the word smooth. I think that's a question for the Bureau and not for the law draftsman. Now on the question about livelihood, like what the draftsman said, well, the DC ordinance is special in a way that district council has the function of upholding the well-being of people in the district. And that is related to the livelihood of people in the district. And the member mentioned about the living environment. District councils in our meetings will discuss frequently issues relating to the living environment. So that hence is inclusion here. And then E, why we say smooth delivery? We can just say assist in the delivery, etc. But we would like to emphasize that DC's function is not just to provide the service, but to make sure that the delivery of service is smooth.
If you have follow-up questions, please wait for a second round. Now we turn to Mr. Kitson Yang, section 4A, bracket A and bracket E. Some comments and questions. In the past, district councils would have members comment on papers right away. Here it says that the district councils will be consulted by the government. So this means district councils will become more passive. It gets consulted only when the government does so. Can we insert a provision that says that district councils can advise the government, that the DCs can make comments on different matters? That would help spell things out more clearly. And there's also references to recreational, cultural, livelihood issues. But there are also housing, traffic issues and facilities, can we also put those into the provisions? Can we spell them out saying that district councils can also be consulted on those matters? Or is it the case that the provisions here are broad enough to cover housing, traffic, and whatever else that falls under the umbrella of district matters? Bracket A. At the subcommittee meetings, we got comments from members. The wording here to be consulted by the government is actually in line with Article 97 of the Basic Law. District councils are supposed to return to their role under Article 97 of the Basic Law, and that's why you have to provision here. Now, is it the case that district councils cannot make their views known? This is not the case. In under bracket B, bracket C, it says DCs will collect the views of the people and also establish communication channels. They have to reflect the views to the government. E, you see cultural, recreational services. As you see, there's an item I here. The government can entrust or commission DCs to undertake certain matters. So the scope will go beyond just cultural, recreational matters. When we say services at the district council level, it's usually about cultural, recreational, environmental, sanitary matters. Please continue. Mr. Yang, do you have a follow-up question? Yes, I do. Under bracket B, the district council chairman will ask members to collect the views based on a theme set by the chairman. So if a matter falls beyond a theme set by the district chairman, the members cannot collect the views. Say you have a burst pipe, the matter needs immediate attention. Now, of course, people can reach out to the government department, but if that's a long-standing issue that remains unresolved, and you can have the DCs reflect people's views. In that case, you need to circulate papers to reflect people's views. Under bracket B here, unless the DC chairman makes it a topic for discussion, the DC members cannot have a paper circulated and have a discussion about the matter. I don't see from A through E anywhere that can address my concern. A says that the DCs are supposed to be consulted by the government, but how can that address the problem I was mentioning? Secretary, Mr. Kitson Yang's question has actually answered the question themselves, his own question. Members can submit papers following the standing orders of the district councils and have a discussion. The DC chairman will look at those matters and decide whether those matters have to do with the well-being of the local people. At the current term district councils, there are matters that go beyond the terms of reference of the DCs. In those cases, if that happens in the next term, the DC chairman will not approve those items. But if a matter falls within the scope of matters related to the local people's welfare, then the DC chairman will allow the discussion of those items submitted through papers. Dr. Frankie An. Section 4A, I have some questions. Bracket B. Collect views of people in respect of an issue specified by the chairman. But this is about the functions of the district councils. Do we have to specify those are the matters specified by the chairman? Because we have a separate section on the functions of the DC chairman. And also, there is some very awkward phrasing in the Chinese text. And that has to do with bracket E. Can we rephrase the Chinese text of bracket E so that the provision becomes less awkward? And now, bracket F. Those for the purpose of promotion of sports, arts, and culture. Again, this has to do with the Chinese text. Can we put in something along the lines of for the purpose of promoting local events, celebration events, and greening volunteer work. Mr. Kwong, we can consider whether we can rephrase bracket E to make it less awkward. Now, bracket E has to do with the delivery of cultural, recreational, and environmental sanitary services related to the interests of people. Now, under bracket F, we have the word such as there. So we spell out the kinds of activities covered there. Now, under F, you see local events, celebration events. The wording is clear. And then bracket 3, greening, volunteer work. So these are the kinds of activities. Chairman, I want to address a point about bracket B under section 4A. We have to specify these are issues specified by the chairman because the DC chairman will set the agenda and decide what are the items to be discussed. If we take out the reference to the chairman, then you end up with a situation like what we have now. Some people will propose items at district councils that go beyond the terms of reference of DCs. So we have to specify, these will have to be issues specified by the DC chairman. Chairman, I have a comment. We're talking about the DC functions here. We're not talking about what happens during DC meetings. Functions of district councils cover an area broader than just the DC meetings. You can talk about the functions of the chairman in a separate section. My second point. Now, I understand there's a reason for the word related to the interest of the people, but I'm just suggesting, can we rephrase bracket E to make it less awkward? Chairman, I need to stress that under bracket B, we need to keep specified by the chairman are the phrases that we have to keep. District councils have to stick to their terms of reference in their meetings and discussions. So we have to make it clear that these issues have to be issues specified by the DC chairman. And on the phrasing of the provisions, we will explore those points with our law draftsman. I understand that members may find the provisions clunky, but there's a reason these provisions are drafted in this way. They are aligned with the provisions elsewhere, but we will study the members' comment. Mr. Stanley Ng. Chairman, Mr. Ronick Chen made a point about the provisions, livelihood, and living environment. In Chinese, they use a particular punctuation and sound like livelihood and living environment are at a parallel level. So I suggest changing the Chinese punctuation to make things clearer. Can the law draftsman consider my comment? That's my first point. And my second point, on the functions of DCs, we are too rigid with the provisions for DC's functions. Now the government adopts an executive-led model for DCs. The DC chairman will set the agenda. DCs will be consulted by the government instead of proactively advising the government. For sure, under bracket C, it says when people have views in a district, there will be a regular communication mechanism. But that mechanism is just about communication. But how can a matter be escalated to a DC meeting? We don't see how a mechanism for views of district people to be communicated to the government. Can we give DCs broader functions? So you're saying the provisions are silent on how DCs can follow up on views from people in the district after receiving the views. Chairman, under the Basic Law, Article 97, the Hong Kong SAR government can set up district organizations which are not organs of political power to be consulted by the government of the region on district administration and other affairs to be responsible for providing services in the fields such as culture, recreation, and environmental sanitation. As we said in our opening remarks, we are pursuing this amendment exercise to return district councils to their role under Article 97 of the Basic Law. Under Article 97 of the Basic Law, you say district organizations to be consulted by the government and provide services. Mr. Stanley Ng proposes broader functions for DCs, but that falls outside the scope of Article 97 of the Basic Law. For district councillors and members of the public, they see what the government is doing. People have views. District councillors get the views, and they can reflect those views to the government. But the functions of DCs need to stick to what's under Article 97 of the Basic Law, and we should not expand the functions. Mr. Stanley, I'm not saying we should go beyond what's under Article 97. I'm saying we should have room for district councils. Under bracket C of Section 4A, can we do something such that DCs can put forward their views? Anything from the Policy Bureau? Chairman, as I was saying, under A, B, C, and E, DCs will be consulted by the government. I mentioned this in my reply to Mr. Kitson Yang. District councils can raise items during items in line with the standing orders. District councillors can raise matters for discussion. District councillors get the views, and then they can raise items, propose an item on the agenda during meetings. Of course, the DC chairman will decide whether those items are in line with the DC's terms of reference. At DC meetings, a discussion happens, and then the councillors come to a decision and agree on a course of action. Now, back in the days when DCs were working, we had this practice. Say the DC thinks an item requires the government's attention, then the DC chairman writes to a particular government department and asks the department to follow up. Or at the district management committee, the DC chairman can raise an item. So there will be a way for DCs to follow up on matters. Next, Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Section 4A bracket C. Let me read out. To establish a regular communication mechanism with the people in the district, to meet with them and listen to their views regularly. Listen to their views. But what happens next? After listening to people's views, can we insert something into this provision? Establish a regular communication mechanism with the people in the district, meet with them and listen to their views, and reflect those views to the government. Can we put something like that? Under bracket B, it says collect views in respect of an issue specified by the chairman of the DC and then submit it to the government. So to make bracket C complete, we should include a part that says submitting or reflecting the views to the government as appropriate after listening to people's views. That's my comment. Now, on a different note, at previous meetings, I asked questions about the minor works at district levels and rural levels. The DCs could play a proactive role in the past. Now, of course, there are different mechanisms to cover those now. Let's look at bracket F. To apply for funding for projects and activities, and then we have 3 items. 3, greening. So greening is a kind of minor works. So can the government tell us more about the legislative intent? Rural minor works, district minor works. I think people will be disappointed if these district councillors can no longer get involved in district minor works or rural minor works. Now maybe there will be a change in the roles of district councils. But can we clarify this point? For bracket F and bracket 3, I find it strange that greening in particular comes up in the provision. But why be so specific with bracket F, bracket 3? A question for the Policy Bureau. Bracket A, DCs will be consulted by the government on livelihood, living environment, and the well-being of the people in the district. So that can cover the minor works at the district level, as mentioned by Dr. Law. Starting from October 2021, district councils could no longer approve district minor works. Starting from that point, the district officers took over the approval. Now we can follow this practice. Section 4A, bracket A. So that covers what I was saying. And then bracket F, to apply for funding for projects and activities. Bracket F refers to the district development subsidies. So they have nothing to do with the district minor works. Subsidies for district development are areas where the district councils and their subcommittees can apply for funding for the works. But the district minor works fall outside district councils. DCs used to have the power to approve the funding, but now with the executive-led model, DCs will no longer have the power to approve the funding, but they can make comments. Now, what about Section 4A, bracket C? Can we add the part that says, after listening to people's views, and then the DCs reflect the views? Ms. Alice Mack. Now, after district councillors receive the views from people, they can propose an item on the agenda for DC meetings. They can reflect those views to the government. DC members can make comments. And then they can also write to the government departments. But if we are too specific in the provisions, then you get a problem, because a district council may receive views and then they resolve the issues on themselves. But if we put it into the provision saying that they have to reflect the views, then it becomes a duty on the councillor to have to go through that process. You end up with excessive rigidity. Now, on district minor works, in the future, it would be different from our past practice. Before 2020, district councils would approve the funding for district minor works, and then the DCs would find contractors to work on the projects. But starting from 2020, district councils would no longer be hiring contractors. Starting from 2020, the Home Affairs Department would engage the contractors. And then for rural district committee, rural works and district works, the DCs can make the comment. The matter will have to go through the district governance committees, and then the contractors will be engaged. For Section 4A, bracket C, to establish regular communication mechanism with the people in the district, to meet with them and listen to their views regularly, and reflect the views to the government as appropriate. That's my proposal. In that way, when someone reads it, they find it more palatable. They don't get the impression that the DC members will just listen without following up. But since, as the Secretary is saying, the other provisions are clear enough, so can the government take on board my suggestion just to make things look nicer? And that's why I propose an insertion is saying, reflect the views as appropriate. The DC members don't have to reflect every view they get, but I think the provision as appropriate can address that concern. That's just my comment.
I also wonder if DCs are supposed to listen to people's views only. Well, but you mentioned that members of DC can propose an item on a meeting and as well as write to the government. Correct. Next, we have Mr. Gary Chen. Chairman, I have also a question about Section 4A, bracket F, to apply for funding for projects and activities. I understand that the government came up with this provision for some reasons, that is to prevent DCs to apply for funding for projects and activities that are beyond the terms of reference of DCs. So you are narrowing the scope of projects and activities here to projects in relation to sports, arts and culture, local events and celebration events, as well as greening and volunteer work. I find the scope of projects listed out here quite narrow. Well, Secretary, you were once a district councillor yourself, and in district councils, we often organize activities that are related to the livelihood of the community. For instance, activities in relation to rodent infestation or anti-mosquito campaigns, etc. And in your paper, you also mentioned that DCs have the role to organize activities that are in relation to environmental sanitation. If DC members want to organize activities like these, and if you don't allow them to, it may sound unreasonable on your part. I wonder, apart from the 3 types of activities mentioned here, there can also be activities in relation to environmental hygiene so that DC members can get funding when they want to organize events like these. Well, I have some relevant questions as well. Let me ask my question and then have the government officials respond in one go. Yes, under bracket F, there are 3 types of activities listed out. I think if you just say projects and activities, the scope may be too wide. And that may sound like district councillors can apply for funding for any projects and activities. I wonder if this has to be consistent with Article 97 of the Basic Law, that is, DCs are responsible for providing services in culture, recreation, and environmental sanitation. And do the activities organized by district councillors only fall under the scope of culture, recreation, and environmental sanitation? Well, these are just some examples given in the provision. I think the main point here is about applying for funding. In the past, DCs could make their own decisions on what kind of activities they wanted to be held. But starting from the 7th term of DCs will have to abide by Article 97 of the Basic Law because they will no longer be able to apply or approve funding. So bracket F sets out specifically to say they can apply for funding instead of approve funding for projects and activities. But the projects and activities to be organized have to be in line with the functions of district councils as set out in Section 4A. For instance, if they want to organize an anti-mosquito campaign, of course, such activities will fall under the scope of matters of well-being of people in the district. And within the terms of reference, district councillors can apply for funding for projects like these, unlike in the past when they could approve funding. Chairman, I think the response made by the Secretary is important because by just reading the provision, I could not understand what the Secretary said or I didn't get such meaning. So in the future, I think the Secretary will have to make it clear in the guidelines for district councillors. Otherwise, district councillors may only apply for funding for projects and activities according to the provisions set out here. And this may have an impact on district councillors serving their roles and functions. I think what the Secretary mentioned should be made clear in the guidelines for the district councillors in all 18 districts. I understand that the scope set out in the legislation may be very wide, so we may have to rely on the future guidelines to make it clearer. Well, in the future, DC chairman will set the standing orders for meetings. For instance, we talked about what to do with the views collected and how to apply for funding from the government. All these will be set out clearly in the standing orders. We will formulate a set of standing orders to be used by all 18 districts. Currently, we have different standing orders for different districts, but in the future, we will have one consistent set or one standardized set of standing orders, and all that we have mentioned just now will be included in the standing orders. Next, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. I have a question about the standing orders. Under the 18 districts, there are committees to discuss specific issues or matters. Same issues may be discussed across various committees set up under different districts, but the names of these committees all vary under different or in different districts, and this is hard for people to understand. I wonder, apart from the standing orders of the 18 districts, like when we discussed about Section 4A, I wonder the relevant details could be included. For instance, the term livelihood may cover a lot of things, but some members suggested that the term livelihood is not commonly used in prevailing provisions. For matters that are commonly discussed across various districts, can we have the wording of those matters included in the provisions? Under Section 4A, it says DCs are to establish a regular communication mechanism with the people in the district to meet with them and listen to their views regularly. Previously, we had the discussion about the policy, and back then the Bills Committee had not been set up yet, and we didn't have a chance to look at the provisions in detail. And we asked about whether the regular communication mechanism will be led by the DC chairman and whether regular reports will have to be submitted. So I have questions about these. And my second question has to do with Section 4A, bracket F, bracket 3. Greening and volunteer work. Again, it is a question about the wording. Well, volunteers are people that we're relating to or referring to. So I wonder if we should put the term volunteer work or voluntary work here. Secretary. I'll first respond to the question about standing orders. What Mr. Kwok has just mentioned will be included in the standing orders. As mentioned, in the future, we'll have a standardized set of standing orders for all districts, and the content of the standing orders for all districts will be similar. They won't look exactly the same because the matters to be dealt with in each district will be different, but there will be a standardized set of standing orders. As to how district councillors will collect views and propose items on meetings. These will be set out in the future standing orders. As for the question about bracket F, bracket 3, I'll defer it to my colleagues. We used volunteer work in English. Well, it has the same meaning as voluntary work. Mr. Holden Chow. Thank you, Chairman. I have 2 questions. First, I want the government to clarify about this. Currently, the proposed section 4A is related to the functions of district councils. Having been a district councillor myself, well, I understand that sometimes there are discussions about traffic arrangements, and the traffic issues of one district may have to do with the traffic issues of another district as well, and there may be joint operations or projects between 2 districts. For cross-district issues, I understand that they are within the terms of reference of district councils. Currently, the proposed provisions do not include cross-district issues, but I wonder if the government has had a thought about this, and that Section 4A will include the handling of cross-district issues as well. I have a question about 4A bracket F as well. It says district councils are to apply for funding for projects and activities. I understand that the functions of district councils do not include approving funding for projects and activities. In future, if a DC wants to apply for funding for a specific project or activity, the DC will have to apply for funding from the relevant bureau or government department, but not from the district officer. What I understand is that for matters in relation to money, it will be approved by the relevant bureaus or departments. Secretary. Thank you, Mr. Chow, for the question. Mr. Chow mentioned 2 aspects to the question. When an issue arises in a district, it may be related to another district. For instance, for bridges, the bridge may be situated within a certain district, but then it is the people from another district who are using the bridge. So for cross-district issues that involve, for instance, a bridge, of course, these matters can be discussed in the DC concerned. But we understand that there used to be the not in my backyard mentality, but with the improved governance at the district level, there will be strengthened leadership. We also have the steering or the task force on district governance to be chaired by Deputy Chief Secretary. In the past, before 2020, an amount of funding is given to a DC, and the DC can decide how to use that funding, and the Home Affairs Department cannot interfere with the DC on how to use the funding. In the future, it will be different. when a DC decides to organize certain activities or events, well, of course, we'll have to look at the nature of the events and activities. If it is a minor work or a rural work, then it falls under the purview of HAD. Say if the railing of a staircase has to be improved, then the DC will have to apply for the funding from the Director of Home Affairs. So you have to look at the project to decide which government bureaus or departments you have to apply the funding from. I think we've had enough discussions about this. I will draw a line here. For members who would like to ask questions, please press the button. I will draw a line after a minute. Next, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. Thank you, Chairman. Section 4A is about the functions of district councils. It's important because it regulates what district councils can do. It's important to have a clear scope here on the functions of DCs. Just from the legal wording, we all care about Section 4A bracket E. Secretary says clearly that DCs will have to collect views from people of the district on a specific issue. If this is included in the law, well, you know, district councillors reach out to different people in the district and they talk to the people and they collect views on a daily basis. And the views they collect may be related to the livelihood issues of the community. And Section 4A bracket C mentions specifically that district councillors have to collect views. However, after collecting the views, if the issues do not belong to things that have to be discussed in the meetings, what should they do? Well, Secretary mentioned that there will be a set of standing orders or administrative guidelines for district councillors to follow. We haven't seen the standing orders yet. Upon the passage of the bill, there may be restrictions to what you can include in the standing orders because you're not empowered by the law to include them in the guidelines or in the standing orders, and that may be problematic. It looks like the administrative guidelines and the standing orders will be able to resolve some of the issues, but I think there are points to be clarified from the legal point of view. Secretary, thank you, Mr. Chen, for the suggestion. Mr. Chen's points are similar to that made by other members. That is, what district councillors should do after they have collected the views. If the views are related to government policies, can these views be reflected? We have to follow the positioning of district councils set out in Article 97 of the Basic Law. So how we draft the provisions here are in accordance with Article 97. District councils may collect views that are not related to issues specified by the DC chairman. As mentioned, if it is set out in the standing orders, district councillors can propose items that are not specified by the DC chairman. Of course, we'll have to see whether the matters to be discussed are beyond the terms and reference of DCs. District councillors who have collected views from people in the district, they can follow the provisions set out in bracket C, D, and E. They should collect the views and at the same time reflect those views to the government. They should not adopt the mentality of not in my backyard. They should collect the views and reflect them to the government, and they can propose an item on the agenda of the DC meetings.
If they have collected views, they can tell the chairman the same at any time, because some of the issues may be urgent, and the chairman of the DC will be the district officer, so views can be immediately reflected to him or her, especially for pressing issues or urgent issues. Can I follow up very quickly, Chairman? According to what the Secretary said, so in relation to bracket C, like what the Vice Chairman suggested, maybe we should add, reflect the same to the authorities or the DC chairman, so that when you draft the standing orders in the future, these will be the things to go by. Yeah, Mr. Peter Shaw, I have a question on consultation in 4A bracket A. To be consulted by the government, affecting the livelihood and living environment. And then for bracket B, then the chairman will specify issues whereby views should be collected. And in bracket D, to support and assist in the promotion of laws and government policies. Again, it will be led by the government. And bracket E, under the coordination of the government to assist in the smooth delivery of services related to the interest of the people. So all these are government-led projects or services. And for bracket H, under the coordination of the government to cooperate with other consultation and service organizations in the district. And bracket I, to undertake any other matters is commissioned by the government from time to time. So it's a top-down approach here. And for bracket C, to establish a regular communication mechanism with the people in the district, to meet with them and listen to their views regularly. It seems to be a bottom-up approach here. And for bracket G, to provide services for people in the district, such as consultation and case referral services. I believe that this, again, is a bottom-up approach. Residents can reflect their views here. Now, what I want to say is that the government has set out very clearly the functions of DCs, and that's something good, especially in the past. Things which people do not understand happened, and I think it's good that you set things out clearly here. But then there are issues of concern to people, say, for example, in bracket C, as mentioned by members, there are, say, environmental hygiene, cultural issues which are of concern to people in Hong Kong. So this is, if these can be included, then there's something good. Now, as for transport and infrastructure projects and so on, I've served in the DC for 10 years, and these are the issues of utmost concern to people, and these are not set out here. And the Secretary said that, say, in the guidelines, these will be made clear. I'm particularly concerned about transport issues, because for every district, the transport needs of a district may differ substantially from that of another one. And so there might be some problems with the minibus routes in a certain district. And if the government can consult the residents on the change of the routes of minibuses and buses, and residents will be very happy. But these are not set out here in Hong Kong. So we adopt a bottom-up approach here, try to collect views from the residents on how bus routes should be changed. Well, change in transport routes or bus routes are often discussed at district council meetings. So I have this particular concern relating to transport. Can you reply briefly, please? So members, please note, on the 2nd of May, we submitted a Legislative Council brief to the LegCo, and in paragraph 41, we mentioned about the performance monitoring mechanism, and we said that the chairman will set out certain performance indicators, standard of performance required of DC members, and that is to collect residents' views and reflect the same to the authorities and submit regular reports. The member referred to environmental hygiene and transport issues, and these will also be set out in the guidelines in the future. So the DC members should collect views on those issues and reflect the same to the chairman. So there is no question of no follow-up. So it doesn't mean that we should not deal with transport issues, no. These are all livelihood issues which should be followed up. When we look at 6A and 672B in 1A, that will be set out clearly. The Secretary will issue guidelines to set out the performance required on DC members. So these are set out in paragraph 41 of the paper submitted to the Council on the 2nd of May. And for 4A bracket E, the government will consult issues relating to cultural, recreational, and environmental, sanitary, and other services. But it doesn't mention anything about transport issues or services, so I'm concerned about that. Mr. Lighton Kwok, I agree with what colleague said. And for 4A bracket C, my view is this: to establish a regular communication mechanism with the people in the district. So it should do so on the basis of the district council as represented by the DC members. When they have collected views from the people, I believe that there should be a mechanism whereby the views will be reported to the DCs. As to whether the DCs should further pass on the views to the administration, it will be up to the district council to decide. The vice chairman talked about transport issues and also adding in the words of follow-up duly, then I agree with that. And then for a bracket F, I agree with the secretary that these are just the examples cited. These are not exhaustive. These are just examples. And I'm worried, or I'm concerned about F1. You again mentioned in the Chinese version, it repeats the words projects and activities. And for AI, to undertake any other matters as mentioned, commissioned by the government. The word undertake in English, what is the meaning of that? Does it mean that the DC should undertake everything that the government commissions them? Or will that mean consultation? This is a word with neutral meaning. Well, in the basic law, it says that to be consulted by the government on all matters. But then, and what you can do is rather limited. Well, the first is about comment, and then the second question is relating to the duplication in wordings, and then the meaning of the word undertake. Can the law draftsman take those questions, please? Thank you. Chairman, like what the administration said for F bracket 1, the purpose is for promoting sports, arts, and culture. So in the Chinese version, we have to include the word projects and activities at the end of the sentence because that's grammatically correct. We think that the meaning is clear. As to the meaning of the word undertake, and that is to reflect the policy intent. And in the future, the government can commission the DCs to undertake certain matters. When the government does so, the DCs must undertake to deal with these matters. So I wonder whether the Policy Bureau has anything to add. Well, the term undertake in 4A, bracket I, to undertake any other matters. The intent is that is for A, if there are scenarios falling outside of A to H, then we can still ask the DCs to help us out on certain matters. As to what specifically that means, we will abide by Article 97 of the Basic Law. Mr. Simon Ho Lee, I have 2 comments. First, members are very concerned about consultation, and that is whether the DC members can take the initiative to do certain things. Well, let me supplement. And the 12th of March 1997, the Policy Steering Committee held a seminar, and there was a report. And the report listed out the details of the consultation power, and there are 7 aspects to the meaning. And in point 3, it says the district bodies, members of that bodies, can take the initiative to ask the government to consult DCs on certain matters and have the right to ask for information from the government and to provide further information to facilitate discussion and consultation. So based on that, we can see that district council members can take the initiative to raise certain matters, although under Article 97, it says that the district organizations are to be consulted by the government. They do have the initiative to raise issues and to consult people in the district. So this is number one. This is the policy intent or legislative intent back then. And in bracket F, I think it's a technical issue here. To apply for funding for projects and activities such as, I would like to follow up on Mr. Pen Chen's point. At this stage, I think we should be more encompassing in scope rather than make our scope narrower. Can we say that to apply for funding for projects and activities under its term of reference, such as, and whether we should list concrete examples, this is up for consideration. And then if we want to do set that, we should say such as, but not limited to the following. Well, these are my views. Any response? Well, I'd like to thank Mr. Lee for his supplement and his comment. Any supplement from the law draftsman? No? Well, so maybe one more member can raise a second round. Mr. Ronik Chan, 3 minutes, including questions and answers. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to raise a point about 4A bracket 8. We talk about livelihood and living environment. For the DC ordinance, there are points, 4 functions. Well-being was listed. And then public facilities and services were included. And now we are replacing them with livelihood and living environment. But these seem not good enough substitute. Maybe a livelihood should be followed by a comma, and then living environment, and also public facilities and transport services and so on are also concerned to the residents. So can we list all these in this clause as well, while citing these as examples? So can the government reconsider this? And then for a bracket I, Mr. Lai Tongko asked about the meaning of the term undertake. The government will include an all-encompassing clause in whatever laws they propose. They would, but for DCs, they are related to district matters. So I would suggest that it should be changed to undertake any other matters related to the district as commissioned by the government from time to time. So that should more accurately reflect the work of the DCs instead of adopting an open-end approach here. So these are my 2 views. Thank you. Any response, we will consider that. Thank you, Mr. Chan, for your comment. Mr. Kisson-Young, 3 minutes, questions and answers included. For a bracket F, the secretary that said that these are merely examples and maybe more details to be given in the guidelines in the future. But anyway, this is legislation, and should we adopt a more open approach? We should add in, say, any other matters as specified by the chairman. Say, for example, anti-epidemic work. Based on the draft here, the DEC may not apply for funding in fighting the epidemic. So can you add in a clause to say that any other issues specified or activities specified by the chairman? Then that would cover everything related to the district. Thank you. Vice Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. In bracket F, to apply for funding for projects and activities, such as, well, there are 3 categories listed. So that means that these are not limited to the 3 examples, but there are a 4th category which is important and that should be added. And that is assist in promoting activities related to the government's policies. Let me give you an example. I used to work at the Sha-Tin DEC. I worked on IT Hong Kong, and that is activities to promote the use of IT in the district. So we put our heads together to come up with activities related to that, and we apply for funding. And after SARS, the economy was hard hit, so we tried to organize activities to promote local economy. So we applied for funding for that as well. So we should add in that 4th category so that the DCs can apply for funding to organize more activities. You may say that I already covers that, but then undertake may not be good enough for that purpose. So I think we should add in a 4th category in bracket F. Maybe we would have a territory-wide organ donation drive. Then that can also be included. And then for bracket E, under the coordination of the government to assist in the smooth delivery of so and so forth services and so on. To assist in the smooth delivery. Smooth delivery. Well, sounds superfluous to me because whenever you render assistance, your purpose is to make to make sure that the activities are smoothly held. So the assist already covers the meaning of ensuring that is smooth delivery of services. So I think the meaning is quite clear already, merely with the word assist. And then legally speaking, there is no clear definition to the term smooth. So since this is a law, we should do away with words which are too vague. And I think the term assist covers the meaning of smooth as well. This is a comment. Well, we would consider your first view, smooth delivery. Well, there might be cases where the DCs will assist, but then whether we can achieve the purpose of smooth delivery, then that's another thing. And I think it's important that we include the words smooth delivery here. Well, then in that case, you might as well get in a smooth delivery to achieve the purpose and so on and so forth. I think assist is already covering the meaning of a smooth delivery. Anyway, that's my view. So please go back and consider it. And for section 4A, I think we are done with the scrutiny. I allow more time for you to discuss this particular section because it has to do with the functions of DCs and it is important. So I have allowed more time for discussion or scrutiny of this section. So the session will end here. The next session will start at 11:15. Thank you.